Coming up on The World Today, Taliban leaders say they have not agreed to U.S. pull-out deadline extension. G7 leaders hold emergency summit over crisis in Afghanistan. Plus, UN says credible reports of executions by Taliban. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Adigoke. We begin with our coverage of the situation in Afghanistan. Taliban leaders say they have not agreed to an extension of the August 31st deadline set by the United States to pull out of the country, and that they want all evacuations to end by that date. Spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid says Afghans crowding Kabul airport should head back to their homes, jobs and normal life, as there is no danger to them.
With thousands of desperate Afghans and foreigners still crowding into Kabul airport in the hope of fleeing Afghanistan's new Taliban rulers, the group's spokesman, Zabihullah Mujahid, says foreign countries should stop encouraging Afghans to leave, as Afghanistan needs their talents.
There's a lot of discussion in the West about
The Taliban also says they will not extend withdrawal deadline for foreign forces that would violate the agreement with the U.S.
This is now, the extension was unilateral by the side of the United States. It was a violation of the agreement. We want them to evacuate all foreign nationals by the 31st of August. And we are not in favor of allowing Afghans to leave.
U.S. allies have warned they will not be able to evacuate all those fleeing the Taliban by 31st August. President Joe Biden has been under increasing pressure to delay the withdrawal of U.S. forces beyond that date. U.S. troops control Kabul airport, from where some 58,700 people, mainly Afghans working for foreign forces, have been evacuated. Chaos punctuated by sporadic violence has gripped the airport following the Taliban's rapid takeover of the country.
Meanwhile, the group of 7 leaders are holding an emergency meeting on the Afghanistan crisis as the United States and other Western powers continue to try to evacuate citizens and Afghans from Kabul. Some Western allies have been pushing U.S. President Joe Biden to extend his August 31st deadline for all U.S. military personnel to leave the country. The meeting, held virtually, comes amid international criticism over the way President Biden handled the withdrawal. The Taliban militant group swiftly took over control of the country this month, and the American government has been working to airlift the remaining citizens and Afghan aides out of an increasingly destabilized Afghanistan. Well, speaking ahead of emergency talks, British Defence Minister Ben Wallace said the U.S. government is unlikely to extend the evacuation window to allow its citizens and Afghans more time to fly out of Kabul.
The military would have to leave before that date, and then, of course, the evacuation of refugees and entitled personnel and British passport holders and all the other people that I've talked about would have to be before that. So I think my point is we don't have the luxury of days and days or weeks. We have literally hours to make sure that, you know, everybody that we can get through the gate, through the flow, the processing centre and onto the aircraft. And if I were to give you an example, in the last 24 hours, we have flown out 2,000 people, over 2,000 people from the airport. They have been processed, called forward and on a plane back to safety. We have done over 10,000 since April, and 8,600 alone since August the 14th. Big challenges, but we're trying every minute to get more people on the planes. Time matters more than anything. Look, we've planned for the worst. The 31st of August is why we flew in 1,000 troops now to access the system, to be there to process these people, to make sure we secure the airport. We flew them in, midway through August. They've done an amazing job. But look, I wish we had more time. I think at the moment it is unlikely. I see the statements, the public statements from President Biden. I've seen the statements from the Taliban. But we have to plan on the 31st of August being the last moment. Every day we get after that would be a big bonus, and we would like it. We are only there to evacuate those people. We're not there for any other ulterior motives. The Taliban and others should not fear that we're there in any way, but we'll see what they do. And I know people have put the question to them. At the moment, they have said no. You saw that in the interviews in the media yesterday. But time is people.
Our Washington, D.C. correspondent Maria Baird joins us now for more on this. Hello, Maria. Well, the Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby has reiterated that the U.S. military is still planning a full withdrawal from Afghanistan by the 31st of August. Now, with the chaotic scenes we've seen over the past few days and with President Biden vowing to evacuate all Americans, how does the U.S. aim to achieve this with just a few days left?
This is going to be very difficult for the U.S. to achieve in just a few days. We know that this has been, ever since, the day that the U.S. announced this has been definitely one of the most challenging experiences that's happened in the U.S. over 20 years. And so we know that President Biden is very stuck on this, and he's very much saying that he's going to move forward. But as we've seen with the scenes leaving from the airport, this is not going to be anything less than, I think, a major devastation, not only for the people of Afghanistan, but all of the troops here in the U.S. that are definitely, their hearts are bleeding. Many of them spent close to 20 years in combat in Afghanistan, and all of those allies of the U.S. that are waiting to be able to make it here.
Well, the Taliban is saying there will be no extension, and President Biden is under increasing pressure over the U.S. handling of this withdrawal. What are you hearing, concerning the G7 emergency summit?
The G7 emergency summit will be, I think, the time that European allies will pretty much tell President Biden that we're not happy. We're not happy with the decisions that were made to remove U.S. troops as quickly. We know this was something that was set forth by the prior President Donald Trump. But I think our European allies were looking for something different from this administration. But again, if you listen to what President Biden has said, he has said that there has been a long waiting kind of preparation for this day, and that this was always the plan to move out of Afghanistan. And if you understand the economic plight of the U.S. right now, and you look at what's happening with COVID-19, the U.S. is starting to begin to focus in on some more domestic issues, but also, I think, trying to revitalize themselves. We know that from a global economic perspective, the U.S. has been suffering for quite some time now, and it will probably continue to suffer until the U.S. is able to kind of focus in on those key and critical components. And so this is an area that the president has had to make a hard stand on, but the rest of the global community, especially the European allies, are not happy at all as we look at the human rights issues that are bubbling up as a result.
Well, Maria, just before I let you go, there are reports that the CIA chief secretly met with Taliban leader Abdul Ghani Baradar in Kabul amid these evacuations. What more do we know about this?
We know that this secret meeting is one that obviously has recently come out in the news media. We know that this was a potential meeting that was had, a while back. This is not something that we are looking at in the last few days. And we also know that this could have an impact potentially, and I know that they're doing further investigation on why the U.S. and how the U.S. has decided to exit Afghanistan. And so the real question is, was the U.S., did they have any idea that this could have been the result of them announcing the removal of troops from Afghanistan?
All right, then. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you for having me.
Still on the Afghanistan crisis, in France, the Interior Minister says 5 Afghans who were evacuated from Kabul to France have been placed under surveillance over suspected links to the Taliban. One of the 5 has been detained on suspected links to the Taliban. A French ministerial document says the man admitted his membership of the Taliban and said he'd worked as the armed head of a Taliban checkpoint in Kabul. France has evacuated over 1,000 Afghans from Kabul over the past week, including a large majority of Afghans who worked with the French government or French groups in the country. The UN Human Rights High Commissioner Michelle reports of the Taliban carrying out summary executions in Afghanistan are credible. Other rights violations, including restrictions on women and recruiting child soldiers, have also been reported. Michelle Bachelet gave no details of the killings in her speech to the Human Rights Council, but urged the Geneva Forum to set up a mechanism to closely monitor Taliban actions. Shahzad Abga, chair of the Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission, told the UN Human Rights Council to not look away from the situation.
The least the special session can do is to illustrate through actions to Afghans that they will not look away, that the world is committed to at least a credible, strong, and well-resourced mechanism to document the abuses and act as a deterrent. The draft resolution tabled today is a travesty. We have documented that the Taliban advances came with summary executions, disappearances, restrictions on women, media, and cultural life. This is not ancient history. This is earlier this month, and this is today. Women in Afghanistan are being turned down from their offices by the Taliban. Universities have been asked to discuss gender segregation possibilities. Women are required to be accompanied by male members of their family in public. Media are not broadcasting music. Journalists and activists are in hiding or in flee. Former members of the Afghan National Security Forces are scared of the worst, the summary executions. Please ensure the session has a credible and strong outcome. Please do not leave this tomorrow or the next month. Many I speak to in Afghanistan already fear that they may not have a tomorrow. In our worst moments, we call on you to do better.
The World Health Organization says it only has enough medical supplies in Afghanistan to last for a week. Officials say deliveries of more than 500 tons of supplies, including surgical equipment and severe malnutrition kits, have been held up by restrictions at Kabul airport. The supplies are stocked in Dubai, and the WHO is calling for empty evacuation planes to divert there to collect them on the way to Afghanistan. The WHO also says 95% of health facilities in the country remain operational, but some female staff have not returned to their posts, and some female patients are afraid to leave their homes following the Taliban takeover.
Workers has been called to work, return to work, or remain in the post, including female health workers. However, some female health workers are not returned to the post, and some has resigned from their position due to ongoing insecurity situation. Both male and female patients are seeking health services, although some female patients are also fearful leaving their home unless a life-threatening condition. Afghanistan reported over 150,000 COVID-19 cases, more than 7,000 deaths on 23rd of August of 2021. There is decline of testing due to insecurity. The testing rate last week declined 77% in both public and private laboratory compared to the week before.
Still ahead on The World Today. The Tokyo Paralympics kicks off with fireworks at the opening ceremony. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the program. Away from the Afghanistan crisis, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris has accused Beijing of continuing to coerce and intimidate in the South China Sea and pledged that Washington would pursue a free and open Indo-Pacific. Her comments came during a trip to Singapore aimed at bolstering ties with partners in the region as part of Washington's efforts to counter China's growing economic and security influence.
We were at war in Afghanistan for 20 long years. Many members of our military.
Meanwhile, responding to the accusations, China's foreign ministry says the U.S. tries to bully other countries to maintain their own interests. Wang says the order that the United States wants in the disputed waters, which contain gas fields and rich fishing grounds, is one in which it could willfully slander, oppress, coerce and bully other countries and not have to pay any price. The U.S. administration has called the rivalry with China the biggest geopolitical test of the century, and Southeast Asia has seen a series of high-profile visits by top administration officials, including Kamala Harris and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. The head of Iran's prison service has apologized after hackers leaked videos showing the abuse of detainees at Tehran's notorious Evin prison. The hackers released security footage showing guards beating prisoners and dragging one along a floor. Prison's organization chief, Mohammed Majid Haj Mohammadi, says he takes responsibility for the unacceptable behavior. Many political prisoners and dual and foreign nationals are held at that particular prison. Back here in Africa, in Zambia, Hakainde Hichilema has been sworn in as the country's 7th president. Tens of thousands of people were at the event at the ceremony, the Heroes National Stadium in Lusaka, the capital. Several African presidents, as well as leaders of opposition parties from across the African continent, were in attendance at the inauguration. In his inaugural speech, President Hakainde Hichilema promised Zambians that change had arrived. The newly inaugurated leader, who won a landslide victory against the incumbent Edgar Lungu in elections earlier this month, said the future would not be without challenges, for he added the economy would be revived. Chad's ex-ruler Hissene Habre has died at the age of 79 while serving a life sentence for crimes against humanity. He was being treated for coronavirus infection. Habre was found guilty in 2016 of crimes committed while he was president from 1982 to 1990. The conviction was the result of a landmark trial in Senegal. It was the first time an African Union-backed court had tried a former ruler for human rights abuses. Habre was accused of being behind rape, sexual slavery, and ordering killings while in power. However, he denied any knowledge of the crimes. A commission of inquiry formed in Chad after he was deposed in 1990 said his government carried out some 40,000 politically motivated murders and 200,000 cases of torture in the 8 years he was in power. The cumulative total of global COVID-19 cases has exceeded 211.73 million, with the death toll surpassing 4.43 million as of Monday. Let's take a look at the latest in the battle against the virus on our COVID-19 Global Update.
Australia's New South Wales has reported 753 new cases, down from 818 the previous day, although daily infections continue to linger near record levels. Australia has suffered less from the coronavirus pandemic than many other developed countries, with about 44,600 cases and 984 deaths. But a third wave of infections from the Delta variant has plunged Sydney and Melbourne, its largest cities, and capital Canberra, into weeks-long lockdown.
Obviously, our first and foremost priority is to protect human life and to live as freely as possible while we do that. but we also have to accept that there's been no state or nation on the planet that's escaped the Delta strain, that's escaped having cases, and we just have to be real about that. It is confronting, it is scary, but that is the world we're in. That's why we're in a pandemic. It is a plague, a contagious strain of a contagious disease which is sweeping the world, and Australia has done very well compared to the rest of the world. I know that's hard to say when we're going through perhaps our most difficult times here in New South Wales, but we have done incredibly well compared to other parts of the world. The fact that our effective is around 1.3.
According to officials, less than a month into a COVID-19 vaccine booster drive, Israel is seeing signs of an impact on the country's high infection and severe illness rates fueled by the fast-spreading Delta variant. Delta hit Israel in June, just as the country began to reap the benefits of one of the world's fastest vaccine rollouts. On July 30th, it began administering a third dose of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine to people over 60, the first country to do so. Meanwhile, U.S. donation of 500,000 COVID-19 vaccine doses have arrived in the Israeli-occupied West Bank and Gaza on Tuesday, as Palestinian officials work to boost uptake and counter a surge in new cases by requiring some workers to get the jab. The Prime Minister, whose Palestinian Authority has limited self-rule in the West Bank, said on Monday that unvaccinated public sector employees will be put on unpaid leave with immediate effect. And finally, Chinese mainland has administered over 1.96 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccine, with the country continuing to ramp up mass inoculation drive. China has extended the range of vaccine recipients to people below 18 years old, following the approval by health authorities in June, authorizing the emergency use of domestic inactivated vaccines amongst people aged between 3 and 17.
The 2020 Paralympic Games has kicked off in Tokyo with a series of fireworks at the opening ceremony. Dozens of people gathered outside the stadium to get a glimpse of the pyrotechnics and to take pictures, despite organizers having asked people to watch the ceremony from their homes due to the COVID-19 state of emergency in the capital. Like the Olympics, the Paralympics opening ceremony was held with no spectators, and Paralympic events will take place generally without spectators. Organizers said the opening ceremony was attended by about 3,400 members of team delegations, 800 Games stakeholders and guests of honor, and 2,400 members of the media. They've also said they plan to implement the same COVID-19 protocols or playbook as the ones used during the Olympics. The Paralympics are set to run until September the 5th. Meanwhile, the International Paralympic Committee IPC President Andrew Passinson says the Paralympics can convey a message of hope and inclusion while standing as a beacon of light at the end of the dark tunnel as the world is grappling with the raging COVID-19 pandemic. The IPC president says he's overjoyed with the positive message for the Tokyo Paralympic Games to kick off at the Olympic Stadium after a year-long pandemic delay. He also expresses yearning for the upcoming Beijing 2022 Winter Paralympics in anticipation of the excellent preparations and exciting contests prior to the launch of the Tokyo Paralympic Games. And that's it on the program for today. Thank you for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke.